So what I want to talk to you about today is our resources and certainly the inquiry process that really is the center, the heart of what you do with SRI. And so you see, that's what I have up there. And so you'll see what I put together is kind of surrounding that idea of inquiry. So I want you guys are kind of fortunate that you're here because I think this is a lot of what you already do and just want to support you that when you are doing all this deep thinking, that you think about how do I think, how do I learn, how do I make connections with things. And that's how we connect that to our critical thinking, to better research, and you'll see I kind of reiterate that here or throughout the slides. So obviously you know what research is. This isn't reports, right? Reports is when you're saying, you know, this guy was born and died in these years. He was really instrumental in the founding of the United States. He was a this, he was a that. You're just regurgitating facts. And I think you all know, at least, especially those of you who were here last year, this is you're building new knowledge. You're saying, here's the problem, how do I solve it, what do I want to know more about? And that's really what I do as a librarian, is kind of just support all of that. So when you're doing this academic research, right, that idea of just a Google search is over. Like, you shouldn't be utilizing, for academic purposes, you should not be utilizing Google. You can use, as you see there at the bottom, I do have Google Scholar. And the reason we allow and like Google Scholar is that they're peer-reviewed sources. So when you think about when you're doing this deep research, you want things that you can say, I know already this is a good source. And we'll talk about how we do that as well. Okay? So the two places I'm going to have you, when we're done here, I will keep the computer on. I'm going to show you our Schoology group. And you have Mrs. Ruox behind you. I don't know if you all met her yet, but we tag team a lot. And so she can also come around and assist in those of you who are Wiser students. You can join through Schoology. Nikita, you'll be going out to our website, and we'll hopefully be able to find that. It may be on our iPads. And what you'll see is what is down the left side of our website corresponds with the resources that I have over here at Schoology. So it's kind of two platforms, but most students who are kind of Wiser students, they just stay at Schoology. Okay? So you guys in this, first day of the second week of SRI, you've been asking some questions, right? What am I curious about? What do I want from my life? What problem do I want to solve? And so what you'll see, what you hear me talk a lot about is the Big Six research process. You can see those puzzle pieces in multicolors over there. They're kind of embedded, but I'm trying to focus here because it's Science Research Institute that we focus on this inquiry piece, but it fits perfectly with what the Big Six is. Hopefully, you have been able to decide, where do I want to go? And so that maybe by this point in the camp, that you're starting to say, where are my resources? What experiment might I want to try? Is there, you see all these speakers that we're bringing in. Maybe they're piquing your curiosity. And so you're starting to think about, even though you might not know the expert in the field, maybe we've brought that expert to you, okay? So thinking about that, okay? I like, and it's funny, Mrs. Ruox is going to be doing something tomorrow, and she talked about a graphic organizer. When you think about making connections in your topic, that's really organizing graphically. Here's my topic, and then as you start to do research, how can I kind of build this graphic organizer around my topic, subtopics, related keywords? And as you do that, it might also be people. It might also be experiments, depending on which area of science you get into. I like this here, review peer ideas. So if you think about what we did before lunch at 11 o'clock, that was to get you into kind of these home groups where you can just sit and banter about, well, I was going to do this, because what I always like to say, and believe this or not, I said this in Jasper's Ruas, I told this to the entire staff of the high school last year when we started back in school. The smartest person in the room is the room. All of us together are going to be a whole lot smarter than we are if we stay by ourselves. And I want you to think about that when you review your peers, each other's ideas, and when you get stuck in research. Sometimes the best thing you can do is bounce it. And you have some fabulous interns that are certainly able to maybe unstick you or give you some direction if you lack that. And then of course you have the teachers that are here. And again, I have you reflecting. You know, where didn't I go? What else do I need? What am I missing? Okay? So we want you to, oh, I forgot to change that title. It's very hard to read. So gathering and evaluating resources. So I think we're very fortunate at Conroe Advisor that we have some fabulous and college level resources for you to access. So I will show you these. My favorite and ease of use where you guys might want to look at a little today is Gale, and I can show you science and context in there. We were talking about before I started with some of the teachers. We were talking about if you go out to Google Scholar, oftentimes you find good articles, but you don't have access to the articles. Well, JSTOR here is absolutely a collegiate level resource, and you can sometimes grab that title from Google Scholar, put it into JSTOR, and you'll have access to it. So that's really pretty neat. Jove is probably our science all-star, and we're going to have to see how it works today. There are a lot of things on Jove that are free without you signing in. For the Conroe Advisor students, again, we're hoping to get an IP address recognition so you don't have to log in, and we'll show you that as well. And then Power Library is pretty cool. That's actually a resource from your state. On campus, that will open up. Off campus, you need a public library card. So if you find that you like some of the resources, and you'll see some of what Power Library has is the same as what Gale has. They are, Gale is a provider of the Power Library, many of the Power Library resources. And then I put Teen Health and Wellness up here. Depending on what your topic is, you might find something interesting in there. And I think this is the question when you see up here evaluating resources. Which information sources are the best? So like I said to you, and I want to reiterate this, the days of just Googling is over. Now you may have a teacher that gives you some very closed-ended questions like, you know, how far is Mars from Earth? How bright is the sun? I don't know. Those things have just one simple answer, right? You guys are doing much, much deeper thinking. And so you've got to think about what are those deep sources. Now I always love to talk about crap because it usually brings a smile or a giggle. Because if you don't evaluate the resource, you're going to end up with crap for research, and we don't want that, okay? So what does crap stand for? We don't just throw it out there, but it's about, is it current? Is it reliable? Who's the authority? And what's the purpose or point of view? So very quickly, as you guys are doing cutting edge, perhaps, science research, this idea of currency may be important. So you have to think about that. If you're looking for something, this is in my head, I don't know why, CRISPR-Cas9, then you're going to have to go out and find something that's probably pretty new, because that research is right now cutting edge. It's a big deal. And so you probably, now, does that mean you couldn't use something from 5 years ago? Well, it depends on how you were using it. You know, if you want to know who was the first person that did research on CRISPR-9, then you might want to look at something that's a little bit historically older, okay? And I think, Bray, you have a great example of that, right? With the chicken manure into glass. You found a researcher back in the 70s?
Yeah, it was a project that they did in the 1970s, but then people forgot about it, so there isn't anything in recent literature about it. So I had to go back to old newspaper clippings because it didn't make it into a scientific article.
So talk about digging, right? But she found something that actually was the springboard for their Governor STEM project this year. So, you know, sometimes that currency is very important, and sometimes you might have to just say, I need to go back and find an article on it, right? And I want you to think about the P on this, because purpose and point of view. You know, sometimes in science, it's a little bit more rigid, so they're presenting their information and they may or may not add point of view to it. But whenever you're doing any kind of research, you want to think about, you know, is there an angle? Is somebody trying to make me think a certain way or believe a certain way? So the good thing is, if you use some of those resources that I showed you, and I think the key there is peer reviewed, you're going to find that this process isn't as critical as if you found something out on the internet and you'd have to evaluate that resource without, you know, anybody telling you, oh, we've already looked at this and this is a good peer reviewed article. Okay? So I'm hoping that whether you have jumped into this or you're jumping into it maybe this week, is that you start to look for some information on the topic that you want to spend some time with, all right? And start to make some connections. How does it connect to something I've already experienced? How do I know going forward this makes sense to me? You know, one of the things that's really cool about SRI is I think of it as like a saucepan that you're bubbling, and you're thinking about ideas, and then that's going to carry you through depending on what you want to do for the rest of the school year. Do you stick with this research? Do you want to expand on this research? And again, here, this is what we want you to do with your interns in those groups every day. Hey, I found this article. You know, do you think this would be helpful as I go into, and depending on what you're looking at? So, whoops, I hit the wrong thing there. So really think about this, and I love that some of you are taking notes. I think taking some notes and talking about this, you know, one of the things I often say to kids is write it down and then sit and talk about it, right? So that you share, you know, Izzy picked up this, but Emma picked up that, and then you guys get to share those informational pieces that, you know, one of you might have missed. So, as you're doing now, are these your lab notebooks? Is that what these are? Excellent. So, when you're looking at these sources, and I don't know how much exposure you've had to, how do I look at nonfiction and kind of say what's important? What do I need to pull from this? So look at the, you know, I have here, it's kind of funny, read pictures. You do read a picture. There's literacy involved in understanding what that picture's telling me. Oh boy, here I go again. My fingers are not nimble today. What's bold or italicized? That must mean there's something about it, right, that I need to know. If you can mark the text, I love what we call, you know, writing right on the text. I think that's powerful. But if not, then you may just write some notes. And then again, make those connections. Okay? Now, how should I record my notes? I say use a lab notebook. But I also say, can I use this a second, Ariel? If I were you, what I would do, and you guys are a small group, I would draw a line. I'll use Ariel's end of his S, and I would draw a line out here. And I want you to think about the left side as taking notes, and this side over here as making notes. So that when you reflect back on this, you go, oh, we learned this in English, and oh, I have to remember this. This is where you kind of provide context. Thank you. You know, one of the things that I do when I'm reading things, I use a star to say something's important. So I can star something, so say you take some notes and you say, that's really important for me to know. You don't have to write very important to know if you know your own text code. So write a star there. I have one that I introduced to some kids, and it's the infinity symbol. Y'all know what the infinity symbol is, kind of like that loop, right? Where I've made a connection. Whoa, this connects with something I already know. This connects with, right, and you can, so think about those codes, or, you know, you have questions, right? So maybe I say something, and you go, I don't know what Ms. Schmidt means, but out in that making notes, you put that question mark and you can come back to that. Say, I have a question, right? Maybe it's a question you want to think about. Maybe it's a question for your intern, right? When you have that meeting, here's a question I have for you. So think about how I think this part right here might be the most important part, right? It's how do I take the information from my source, how do I take notes, and how do I make notes from what I've written down, okay? And I'm sure, I know you have a piece Mrs. Ruas is doing tomorrow. She's going to extend and piggyback on what you guys are learning today. So make sure if you haven't signed up for her session, you do that. So some things to think about. And again, you guys may or may not be at a level where you're ready to look at some collegiate studies, but if you do, these are just some great ideas to follow. So this is in the app. If you want to go back, you'll see this in a PDF form. Read the abstract. What is the study about? Is this something I want to read or not? And you might read that abstract and go, this isn't relevant. Then we need to move on. What the authors want to learn? You could read the first paragraph of the intro. You should always read the last paragraph, the conclusion. And again, there is that word. Is it relevant to my topic or my research? Okay? That's the beauty of scanning. You don't want to read a couple of pages or 14 pages or whatever and find out this doesn't really relate to what I am looking for. So by doing this kind of thing, you're going to save yourself some time and be smart about it. Okay? Now, as you get to be more scientific in your process, you want to know method. How is the study done? Now, that's the cool thing about JOVE. Now, JOVE is actually short for Journal of Online Visualized Experiments. So you'll get to see some of what you're learning, both in processes and in studies or research, by video. Okay? Data analysis. When I think of this data analysis was the thesis and hypothesis supported, that could get a little deep. How many of you know Mrs. Prohaska? Know Mrs. Prohaska yet? Okay, maybe. She is our statistics teacher. She, among others, could certainly help you if you see there's a lot of data analysis and you're not sure what is it really telling me. And then look, read the conclusion. Right? Does it relate to what you're trying to find out? Does it support or refute the idea that you think you have, right? I think that eating chocolate chip cookies would be the best diet in the world, right? And can you go out and prove that? So in that case, it probably will refute your idea. But all right. Of course, always cite your sources. So I'm assuming the 4 here because I don't recognize you except for SRI. You guys are from middle school, is that correct? What grade?
7.
So you're going to? Okay. So, and do you guys cite sources? I think I heard you're from Wilson, right? You go to Wilson. So you have some. We use Noodle Tools in the middle school, right? You guys maybe have used those already. If you haven't, hopefully your English teacher, you'll have to tell Mrs. Snyder, some of us don't know, how to cite sources, okay? And being a good digital citizen. And I want you to understand everything needs to be cited. You know, it drives me crazy when I watch students here in the high school and they do all this great citation and they put a picture in their presentation that they didn't cite. That's plagiarism. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question for the middle schoolers. Do I hear this right? Are you familiar with Noodle Tools?
Well, they're going to 7.
Do they usually start in
Well, I
7?
thought they usually did, but I thought they had some in 6, but maybe not. We'll have to ask Mrs. Snyder. Okay? But you'll get to that if you haven't already. Okay? You'll get, if you haven't been exposed to Noodle Tools, you certainly, I'm sure will. By the time you get to the high school, if you stay with the heavy science, we'll use EndNote, which I'm assuming you use, and you'll find EndNote. So Noodle Tools is like EndNote, but like the young stage of EndNote. And then EndNote is like citation on steroids. So that kind of gives you a process of where you're going. But if you're going to be a researcher, you absolutely have to cite sources, because you don't just get dropped in the middle of your experiment. You've decided to do something based on probably the research of others, okay? Or at least your starting point is there, okay? All right, and then how do I organize my information to meet the requirements of my task? Well, your task here is pretty open-ended, right? But I wanted to give you something to focus on. So, depends on what your end user task is. Are you doing the science fair? Are you doing PJAS? Excuse me. Are you hoping to get published? So, you know, this part will be dependent on, and maybe it's just you're not sure if you're doing any of those at this point, right? You're still in that gathering information stage. Nothing wrong with that. You might not get the synthesis yet. Okay? So, I want you to do, again, I believe a lot in reflection. So whether it's in the article, after you've read the article, or maybe at the end of SRI, these are the same questions you ask yourself. So what? So what? Now what? Right? So what did you learn? What were the notes that you took, and what are the notes that you made? And then how is it relevant? Why is it important? You might find in a very important what not to do. Let's imagine it's a chemistry experiment and there's two compounds that you should never put together. I'm assuming they're out there. Is that true? There are, right?
Ammonia and bleach.
There you go. So, right, you're going to learn what's relevant and why is it important. Well, I learned something not to do, and sometimes that's just as important in my experimenting, obviously, to stay safe. And then how are you going to extend the learning? And I say other situations here because this is a bit more global, but to my experiment, to my area of study, right? Okay. So I don't know if you've heard this word iterative. I think iteration is something all of us need to be pursuing. Because I think when you're learning, going back over and saying, here's what I did well, here's what I didn't do well, where can I get better, what am I missing? When you guys are doing research, right? You know, we might laugh about ammonia and bleach, but you sure better know not to put those two things together or you're going to have a problem. You know, so that's important. But it's a back and forth process. And I want you, sometimes it's okay to kind of like start over. You move backwards in this process. I always like to talk about progress with students because most students think progress goes like this, straight line. And it's not. It's much messier. Progress is I go up and then I fall back a little, and I go up and I fall back a little. And that's really what iteration is. It's I see what I want, and then I don't think I have everything I need, so I got to go backwards in the process. All right, and it might mean that your questions have changed. That's okay. That's actually wonderful. I always do it at the screen. So every day that you're here at SRI, that's Mrs. Prohaska right there.
And
There you go. I told them if they have data analysis questions, you're the chick.
And I'm leaving today, but I'll be back tomorrow and Wednesday.
Yep.
Okay?
All right, so we want you to work on your research, work on your journal. This journal, by the time you leave here in August, ought to be full. Ideas you heard, things you liked. I got to remember this. Keep looking for sources, read them. All right, look at keywords. And I know I had a young lady today who came in and we printed out an article. So if you're one of those people, and let me just quick say this, understand how you learn best. Some of us can do it electronically. Some of us can read it and take notes on these kinds of notebooks. And some of us need to print the article out and highlight it and circle words and make notations down the side. Then you have our permission to do that. All right, so if you guys don't have a device, go over, sign out, make sure you grab an iPad, and go ahead and sign your name in. I want to show you our resource.